Morning, everybody. Senate Ag on, what is it today? Wednesday, May 4th. And the chair is out at the moment, so has asked me to lead our meeting. And we need to talk about a revised proposal on H 626. Oh, and here's Michael, and then to help us with that. And then I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about Frank, here, join us, please, Michael, the airport language, because Senate Finance is talking about that. It's meeting.
I have an update on that too, and it's
Okay.
entirely different method of addressing it.
Okay, do you want to start with that?
Sure. So apparently someone approached the chairs of appropriation to seek funding for the Franklin County Airport for the mitigation. And so instead of providing a waiver of mitigation, as it's a state entity that would have to pay these fees anyway, that it just becomes part of their budget to pay the fee.
So the fund doesn't lose.
Fund doesn't
But the
lose,
developers-
you don't set a precedent. The developer has that incentive because it's the state that would be doing the mitigation.
Sarah Parent, does that satisfy your needs?
I mean, I've talked to V-Trans, but as long as everyone's happy and it helps, the best we can get, the best we can get, yeah. I mean, I think the longer term issue in this is, how does, the one question I have, and I'm not asking for Franklin County, actually more broadly, when we do things here. So the Franklin County Airport became an airport in 1928, I believe, and effectively was removed from ag soils at that point.
Because of the FAA. Right?
Well, the FAA was around then, but
Right.
we basically said this is the use of that property. The state put the mitigation fees in what, the 1990s in?
I think that was the earliest, yeah. And then it was.
So at what point is the state liable? Because I'm thinking if I was a developer, I'd probably be asking my lawyer if I could sue the state over these fees, because I would say, look, this property was already taken out of ag soils. Why am I paying for ex post facto a fee after something had already happened? And so is this a bigger issue we've stumbled upon on this issue that no one's really pushed? I'm not pushing it just for me, just discussion based, because I would, no matter what airport, if I was developing, I'd really be pushing, you've already removed these from ag soils. Why do I have to pay this fee? These were removed before you even put the fee in place. Why do I have to pay that fee?
Plus you have the overlapping argument that the FAA doesn't allow agricultural use within a certain distance of the airport in order to provide adequate safety.
Right. So my point is, and I get this could be a larger discussion next year and years past. I'll take whatever I can get this year, but I think there's a Pandora's box here that.
Well, I would just offer that in Senate Finance, it was maybe able to bumble out as drafted by this committee, and the precedent issue was very compelling to even those of us that were willing to.
See, I don't think we're gonna have a choice. I think
So-
within the next 3 to 5 years in other airports. I think it's very logical, right? That we've already, it'd be like,
So
it'd
You're
be like
talking
going to a
about
development that was built in the 1980s before these and being like, where's your ag mitigation fees? If they wanted to add one more house.
I mean, you're talking about a legislative move,
Yeah.
presumably in your future. I would caution you to not bring that up in the context of the victory you're getting, it sounds like, in Franklin.
No,
So,
I get it. I just worry that,
you know, there's a clear argument to be made.
The one outstanding issue with this alternative is how much does the airport need?
V-Trans just, I got an email yesterday, it's about $500,000.
Okay.
That's
Because I've
more
heard everything from like $22,000,
Yeah, 22,000 just does like
3 to 4
one
acres.
stage of it, but it's,
So Michael, you're hearing this from Stephanie, from Sarah Kitchell, from who?
Mary Hooper, Amy Sheldon,
Okay.
I wonder if that's the Representative McCarthy might be pitching that end on their side. My problem with that strategy, the budget's gonna get vetoed. Like,
Well, I mean,
there's
there's a lot
no,
of stuff that is suffering if the budget gets vetoed.
I know, but like, does it make it out at the budget? You know, when we come back for a new budget at some point?
Well, you can't pass the money and the exemptions.
I mean, to me, it's a state cost, right? Because
Yeah.
the actual developer is going to be the airport, right? Because they're the one that are gonna have
I
to.
mean, yeah, but the state effective would make whatever company comes in pay that
So
fee.
it-
for them.
Right, but this is
Yeah.
just to provide that incentive that they don't have to pay that fee, correct?
Yeah,
And so it provides that economic attraction that you're looking for, or at least basically the Franklin County delegation was looking for.
yeah.
Sarah Collins.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, thanks. While the end result might be the same, I do think there's almost a tacit approval on our part if we go this route that might set a precedent for something coming later, and I'm not sure that this is the right way
Well,
to win.
I mean, I would point out that prime ag soils function, do have multiple functions.
I was actually at the airport.
Not only crop production, right, or animal raising, they're carbon sequestration, they're water mitigation, you know, they serve functions and.
So I was at the airport this weekend. There was a big truck day at the field day thing, so I took my kid. And obviously it's rained a lot the last few weeks. This is the soil. Like
No, it's-
that,
But that's accounted for, that's.
you know what I mean?
why
Like,
it's
that's not good at soil. That's
So-
the other frustrating part is how we do that. And that's a late day. That's not us, but that's.
But the conservation fund makes farming affordable in a whole host of ways, right? So we need to be protective, I would argue, of that. It's a balance. I don't know if it's the right solution, but if that's what's emerging, that would likely mean that finance strikes that section. And I don't know how we dance
Could we
around.
stick
how
in the
we
T
figure
bill?
that
Could
out.
we talk to the chairs of the pros and stick it in the T bill since it goes to V-Trans anyway? I would feel safer if it was.
Well, that was a question that came up this morning, and Thea Dexter Cooper asked if it's gonna go to AOT.
I would feel safer with it in the T bill.
You gotta put it in the
That's-
T bill, but you also have to reconcile the budget, because the T bill isn't actually funded through the T
Right.
bill.
Right.
I know,
Right.
but if it's in the T
All right.
bill and then we get to negotiations later on, no one usually touches the T
So-
bill.
What I would like to ask Senator Parent is that you and Senator Brock.
Yeah.
By the time finance meets, can help us understand what's going on, because I can relay this little few bits of information, but if Senator Brock can help us understand if it's concluded, or if we need to hold that bill, or if we need to amend it by striking it out, but be ready to put it back in on the floor, you know, I think there's a number of ways we can do.
Well, I think as long as we get to conference, we can get the bill through the Senate. Because the House committee has already passed this bill through their committee and the full House, but
Yeah, no.
that gets aggressive too, but I just think there needs to be a vehicle as we work.
Well-
through it.
But where is the T bill in the Senate right now?
T-bill is in the House, I thought, getting concurred with, but I
I think you're right.
don't know. So there's a lot of moving parts. If I can promise you that the easiest path through finance is to pull that amendment. Otherwise, we can limp it out probably. But if the easiest path were open to us,
Yeah,
that would be better.
understood.
So.
It is, and I'm assuming it's the chair of natural resources who's always also on that committee who has the biggest problem with it.
Well, and no, I mean, I think it's probably a 4-3 vote, but I wasn't here. So then there are other questions like in the language, and Michael was helping me, but it seems pretty wide open, the language,
Oh, I thought it was
as
narrow.
opposed to like in this plot, like it's not clear if in 10 years they gobbled up another plot of land for this development, what would
I thought that was
happen?
clear because it was the current airport is when it passed.
It's the
It's
current
the-
plan.
Well, right, that's the current plan, and so the plan can change in 10 years.
Right.
Right, and so it doesn't say, it says that the plan adopted under the FAA, and that can change in 10 years, and it could then include, what was that testimony, there's a 150-acre parcel that's
I mean,
adjacent.
we could nail the date to the current plan. And maybe that would be a way. I mean, you know, this is what I mean, like finance. I think we would be smart to trim it as tightly or be able to say a few, this is handled elsewhere.
I mean, I'm okay because I read the languages as it currently sits, whatever the boundaries are, no mitigation fees there. If they ever want to expand the airport by adding 150 acres, then you have to pay the mitigation fees.
You know, and I wasn't here the day you guys finalized the language, and so I'm at a disadvantage. I'm trying to stand up.
Because we
for
did
what
change
this
that
means.
piece because the original bill I put in was much more broad.
Oh, yeah,
They
no,
couldn't-
that I made clear. The other thing is folks on finance have been aware of the pressure on all manner of different airports. So this is where the precedent thing is concerning.
Yeah, I mean, really, this really should be bill should go into our economic development committees because it's really an economic development.
There's ways you can work on that if you're.
No, I know, but the problem is
So, all right.
SNRE
So you,
moves, they
is it-
kill it,
is
and it
it-
keeps moving, they
is it-
bury it.
you could have a friendly economic development committee. Oh, it's their brain. So you and Sarah Brock can help keep me up to speed by the time.
I'm trying to get a number from V-Trans, like a solid, because the problem is some of the soils are like 2-to-1, so
Yeah.
what I got yesterday.
Is the ratio 2:1 or 3:1? I've heard different things on that.
So I got, the major development we're looking at is 40, this is from an email, 40 to 45 acre development for 3 businesses. I calculated the cost for the permit using 3,013 per acre. I was correct after my testimony in House Ag, the practice requires 2-to-1 mitigation. So I've doubled my costs. The developer would have to pay between, okay, so even I was wrong, but she had built in, so she's like between 240 and 271 to mitigate soils. They would also have the expense of developing a soils inventory, borings and engineering plans, and the cost of assembling and submitting the application. So add 100 to my guess at 270, because engineers aren't cheap and they charge.
Just go 400,000
Yeah, and then they would have,
for primary mitigation
what would you want to like,
and attendant costs
yeah,
for addressing the mitigation, right? Something like that.
yeah. Because I mean, that's just the trans staff member giving a back of the envelope. That's not like
Right.
gone through the actual Act 250 of this is what you owe.
Right.
Now, would they be able to spend that language? The problem I have with money is what if all of, I mean, once you take, they can just buy the mitigation on all that land now, even without an Act 250 permit? Because they don't, to me, I'm guessing they don't have designs of what's going in this year. They may not for 2
Well,
years.
I mean, if it's allocated, then they could spend it.
Right. And
You would have to
then-
watch budget adjustment.
Right. And, right, if you haven't spent it by budget adjustment, they just reauthorize the use to carry that forward.
For next year. Okay, so we've got a clear understanding, and if you get it sort of locked in by this afternoon, that would be helpful. Otherwise, you know, we can delay this like ag, I would guess, but we're running out of time on all fronts. Okay, good on that. Thank you, Michael. Good update. H626. So this is the latest attempt to get me what I want, which is push the agency, and get you what you want, which is the check back. I'll just highlight, or Michael, why don't you walk through the changes that?
Well, the big change is on page 6.
Yeah, just quickly on page 2, there was that list of all the chemicals and then something that said anything else by rule,
Right.
remember? And
So the question I have is, I'm not trying to be really any economic poison.
That's how we call it.
That's how we call
That
it.
is, because it's back when the pesticide laws, federal pesticide laws were first enacted, it was the most economic way to kill something. So, and Vermont has never changed that statutory reference. So economic poison is the definition.
Okay, because it just sounds bad because
It sounds awful, I totally agree with you.
like I'm not willing to admit this is.
I mean, you've been admitting that for many, remember we were, oh, maybe you weren't here, we raised a bunch of those.
So I could, if you look on page 2, line 4 and 5, it says pesticides shall be used interchangeably with economic poison. If you want me to replace economic poison with pesticide, I can do that. But honestly,
I just think we're getting semantics at that point, I guess.
the official term is economic poison.
Yeah, I mean, they are poison.
That's why they work.
Right, but are they poisonous to human, to whom are they poisonous to?
Depends on which chemical we're talking about.
But,
Most of
Isn't
them
that
are
the
harmful
big
to you.
debate?
right,
But it's the other meaning of the word,
poison.
no, economic. It's about the efficiency of it and not whether it's
Okay.
harming the economy.
Anyway, let's stick
Got
to
it.
what we're actually discussing,
Yeah.
please. So on page 6 is the attempt to,
Right, so the Administrative Procedure Act has multiple kind of benchmarks. And one of those benchmarks is that before a rule is finalized, that final proposal of a rule under 3 VSA 41 is filed with the Secretary of State and LCAR. So you can basically get a check-in or delay the final proposal by saying they can't file under 841 until some action happens. So this says they shall not file that final proposal of rules until at least 90 days from submission of the proposed rules to the General Assembly under subsection A. So you get those rules on or before March 1, 2024, they can't file them with the Secretary of State or LCAR for 90 days. So you would have for between March and the end of that session to do whatever you wanted to do. You could repeal their authority, you could amend their authority, you could adopt the rules and legislation with whatever amendments you wanted. You would have various alternatives between March and the end of the session, and they wouldn't be able to do anything to go forward with that rule.
So what's the or July 1 mean?
Pardon?
well, or July 1 is, I realized there was no end date. So, I've been trying to compel them to do this, and absent that, you just tell them how they couldn't do it any sooner, you're not compelling them. So that's why, but that's actually 120 days roughly from March 1st.
So the rules will be written by the Ag Innovation Board.
Technically, no. The rules are written by the secretary, but they have to consult with the Ag Innovation Board.
And then how much leeway does LCAR have to rewrite the rules?
LCAR doesn't have a ton of authority to rewrite the rules, because if LCAR rewrites the rules too much, it has to go back into the APA process if it's a major amendment to the rule. So it's usually tweaking around the edges or a voluntary change by the agency. If the agency says we voluntarily change, you still have to look at that threshold. If it's a major change that requires renoticing the public participation. But LCAR doesn't have a ton of authority to rewrite the rules.
Because my fear is LCAR.
Well,
But that makes me feel better.
I'm still where I was.
yeah, well, the chair asked me to walk us through this,
Yep.
and
No, I appreciate your work, Chris. I still feel in a lot of ways that we're gonna get to the same point without the need for legislation.
right, without the chair.
I think the innovation board is already set to do it. Wasn't it on their agenda like this week? Or the next meeting, whenever that was?
I mean, that's, they do have authority to adopt, to recommend to the
Yeah.
secretary to adopt rules.
Oh,
The secretary has the authority
The
to
secretary
adopt.
is the one that adopts them, but AIB can recommend. Actually, they have to recommend for these rules.
Well, so Linda, is the expectation that we meet tomorrow? Do you know a time?
9 o'clock
Okay,
to 9:45 to discuss this as a group with Bobby.
okay, very good. I have conference committee at 9:30, but I would guess
oh,
tomorrow morning. But I would guess that half an hour is, I mean, how many more times? We just either decide or decide.
Yeah,
So, okay, anything else for Michael or for any of us?
So just back to the airport,
Yeah,
I think what my takeaway is, because I'm gonna go track down Anthea about the T-bill, because there's gonna be money appropriated to AOT for prime ag mitigation and attendant costs in meeting the prime ag mitigation
at
requirements.
Franklin County State Airport.
At Franklin
Under-
County State
can you
Airport.
say under there, can we find the year that plan was approved?
I can ask Anthea about that.
Yeah, and then I would have Anthea reach out to Trini Broussard at V-Trans,
Okay,
and that Trini might be able to massage language that works for her, because V-Trans is the one really pushing this,
So-
obviously it's their
and
problem.
then we take that number and get that billed into the big bill.
you don't feel there's any sort of legal precedent though for doing it this way? What
Well-
happens if the Rutland Airport next year wants to do a similar
Well,
thing?
that's actually because it's not setting a precedent of waiving the requirement. It's setting the precedent of paying the state airport's costs,
Yeah.
right? And it's a state airport, and so it's a budget
Yeah.
issue, right?
Well, then this is why, like, I don't think this is an ideal solution, because one, my original bill was written for all airports, but I understand I'm asking for one, I wanted to get something for all airports, I understand that we all have our own things, and two, from a budget perspective, in a tight budget year, all that I think gonna happen is you're gonna cut VHCB by $500,000, whatever airport you're doing, and then funnel it into V-Trans to get to VHCB, and
That's a possibility.
that's literally the same thing, because it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's like, I don't care what bank account you pay for groceries out of, just pay for groceries. Like, it's.
Well, I mean, I also don't think anybody is eager to have less conservation money for the good work that they're doing. I mean, that's the other. that,
But-
you know,
but
your
Gus, you weren't
solution
here. Gus
robs
did-
them of $500,000.
Gus did come in and say he was not opposed to it.
Sure, I mean, he's in a tough spot, he's getting more money in the budget this year, but, so I just want to be clear, like, this is not our deal.
Yeah.
This is something that you're hearing other people in the budget committees and maybe in the conference committee are willing to do. And it happens to take away the need for the language that we've passed, right? We would obviously have to revisit this if that budget concept doesn't work. So that's going to be a timing question for the miscellaneous ag bill, in particular finance, which I believe is its last stop. Do you have any idea if there's an appropriation in
There's
there?
not an appropriation. Well, there's some change to one of the funding programs, but it's very minor.
I wonder though, we'll have to talk to Bob if he's gonna wanna make a slight change to that miscellaneous ag bill. If we don't get the language here, just to leave another
Okay,
avenue.
so
open.
I'm gonna put that on you too, but you do have a good opportunity in finance because it's sitting there. I'll ask Bloomer if that bill has to go to, what's the bill number?
709.
709, okay.
Let's just look to see what, that, because you didn't add anything that would require appropriation.
Yeah, but
But I can.
if the underlying bill, you know, did it have to go to House Approps?
I think it may have, no, that was the other one, 250, 81 to House.
Linda, can you look and see if page 709 went to House of Popes? on
I
this
can do that right now, I'm there.
Oh,
It did not.
all right. So more work to come there. Keep me in the loop. I think that's it, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Linda. We're adjourned.